Anybody can be sued for anything. Now, that does not mean that they have a valid claim, nor does it mean they're going to win. But here are a list of a few things that we see that we get calls about. The first is oral contracts. So in New York and Florida, where our attorneys are licensed, oral contracts are binding. The problem is that if you have to go into court and fight or file suit on an oral contract, it's not in writing. So it does make it more difficult to prove or litigate that case. So we do recommend that your contracts are in writing. You want to make sure you understand your obligations under that contract, and you want to have what's called a meeting of the minds. The other thing is misclassification of workers. So this we see a lot, and we see it a lot with smaller or mid-sized businesses, especially with a startup situation. Because what happens is you decide that you need that first employee, that first worker, and you bring in the worker and you label them as an independent contractor. They may even be part-time. The issue is that you cannot arbitrarily label a worker as an independent contractor. There's a criteria that has to be met for them to be labeled or classified as an independent contractor. The other thing is you cannot just give them a title like manager or supervisor and then say that based solely on that title, they can be classified as an independent contractor. And this does cause a substantial amount of litigation, but it also puts the business at risk with having issues with governmental entities due to taxation reasons. The next is intellectual property. You work so hard to build your business, build your brand. You really want to look at whether you need to protect your intellectual property, such as your logo, your name, if you have something that can be patented, or if you're putting out material and it should have a copyright on it. Even once you obtain that protection, let's say that trademark, you have an obligation to enforce your trademark. Make sure somebody's not violating your trademark, meaning, for instance, using that name that you have a trademark on. So one of the things that you would want to do is A, monitor to make sure that's not happening, and B, you may want to send a cease and desist letter stating I have a trademark, you're using my trademark, and you need to stop. The other thing is employment law overall. So there are federal employment laws, there are state employment laws, sometimes there's county, and even if your business is in a city, there could be city employment laws that apply. As a business owner, you need to know these employment laws and you need to make sure you're following them. It's also a good idea to incorporate the rules in that are required under those various employment laws in your policies and procedures and your company handbooks. You also want to make sure your staff is appropriately trained so that you're not violating any of those employment laws. The other one is legal oversight. And you may say, what is that? Well, for example, many large businesses, such as a Fortune 500 business, is going to have in-house counsel. They're going to have a team of attorneys along or coupled with attorneys that for various reasons, they may also have them representing them from outside legal firms. What does this enable them to do? This gives them the advantage of, let's say they have a vendor contract to come across. Then it would be the policy of the company that it needs to be reviewed by legal counsel prior to anybody entering into that contract. Or if they have a 5-minute quick question, hey, we have this employment question, we're not quite sure how to handle it, or if we're in compliance or not, they can quickly run it by legal counsel and they can answer that question. So it enables them to stop or help create an environment where those legal questions are dealt with on the front end and potentially reduce their risk of being sued. Now, a lot of small and mid-sized businesses don't feel that they have this ability because of the cost. Now, Rosenberg Law has what we call a fractional general counsel packages for our clients. What that means is you buy a certain amount of hours every month and you can utilize those hours. And it actually gives a lot of these businesses comfort to know that their staff or the business owner themselves can pick up the phone, talk to an attorney really quickly, send over a contract or a document, and it can be reviewed, and that answer could be answered to them for them very quickly in hopes of preventing them from being sued years down the line.